a category of truck that never needed a marketing department, because the people buying them weren't buying an image, they were buying 20 years of not thinking about their truck. 10 Japanese work trucks, from a 600 cubic centimeter K hauler to a medium-duty cabover still working after 50 years. None of them famous, all of them still running somewhere right now. Along the way, we found something we didn't expect. 2 of these trucks aren't actually 2 trucks. Stick around for that one. Here are 10 Japanese work trucks built to last forever. Number 10. Suzuki Carry. Most people size up a truck by its engine. The Suzuki Carry never had one worth bragging about. 650 cubic centimeters, 3 cylinders. Less power than a modern lawn tractor. And yet somewhere in the mountains outside Nagano, a 4x4 Carry is still climbing a forestry track that would strand a modern half-ton pickup. 1981. That's the year Suzuki first offered 4-wheel drive on the Carry pickup, bolting a proper transfer case and low-range gearing onto a platform that already existed under a tax loophole built around keeping engines and footprints small. Suzuki did something almost nobody expected with that loophole. It turned a tax code truck into a genuine off-roader. The trucks that inherited America's farms in the same era needed V8s to do what the Carry did on a motorcycle-sized engine. The Carry weighs under 1,500 pounds, fully loaded. Weight is the enemy of traction. Until you're small enough that you don't need traction, you need footprint. Rice paddies, narrow mountain switchbacks, orchard rows too tight for anything with a hood. This is where a full-size 4-wheel drive becomes a liability, and a key truck becomes the only thing that fits. It never had a following outside Japan, because it was never built to impress anyone outside Japan. The Carry wasn't overbuilt to win a spec sheet. It was overbuilt because a farmer in Gifu Prefecture needed something that started every morning for 30 years, and Suzuki simply refused to let it fail him. The key truck class has quietly become one of the more exported vehicle categories out of Japan, even though almost none of the buyers overseas ever see a factory advertisement for one. Most arrive secondhand through specialist importers, sold to American farmers and hobby ranchers who found out about them from a neighbor, not a dealership. Here's the number that actually matters. K trucks like the Carry are taxed and insured at a fraction of a standard vehicle in Japan, which means the entire design brief was cost discipline from day one. No margin for a part that fails early, no margin for a design that needs a specialist to fix, and somehow what came out the other end was a truck that outlives trucks 10 times its displacement. Drive one today, and the appeal is obvious within the first turn. The visibility is absurd, the turning radius is tighter than a golf cart, and low range makes terrain irrelevant at walking speed. It's not fast. It was never supposed to be fast. It was supposed to still be running decades later, and it is. Comment below if you've ever seen one of these outside Japan. Number 9. Nissan Hardbody D21. Ask an American rancher what unkillable means, and there's a decent chance he points at a truck with a dent in the fender he's owned since before his kids were born. That's the Hardbody's reputation, not built by marketing, built by 3 decades of ranch work nobody bothered to document, because the truck simply kept starting. The D21 officially launched in November 1985 as an 86 model, which is why you'll see both years quoted. But the truck people actually call the Hardbody ran production all the way to 1997. Nissan needed something to fight the Toyota pickup for the same blue-collar buyer, and it built the D21 around a philosophy that had nothing to do with comfort. A boxed frame, a live front axle on the 4-wheel drive versions, and an engine lineup built for neglect rather than performance. Early trucks ran the 2.4-liter Z24i 4-cylinder. It wasn't until the 1990 model year that Nissan swapped in the KA24E. The engine mechanics actually built the reputation around, thanks to a proper timing chain instead of a belt and a compression ratio low enough to survive being run hard on cheap fuel for years without complaint. The 3.0-liter VG30 V6 arrived in 1989 for buyers who wanted more power, though it never fully displaced the four-cylinder's reputation for simply refusing to die. The trucks competing against it in the same showrooms in 1990 are landfill statistics now. The Hardbody isn't. Search any farm auction in the American Southwest today, and you'll still find D21s doing fence work, still towing stock trailers, 30-plus years, and several 100,000 miles past, when Nissan expected them to retire. It never got the cult reputation of its Toyota rival. Nissan didn't push the marketing, and the truck was too busy working to build a following. That's the quiet humiliation buried in this one. The more famous truck needed a legend. The Hardbody just needed an oil change every few thousand miles, and it did the rest itself, one exhaust manifold stud failure aside. A known weak point mechanics still warn buyers about to this day. The D21 also has a bloodline most owners never think about. It directly replaced the Datsun 720, the truck at position 2 on this list, and the Hardbody's own body style went on to spawn the Nissan Pathfinder midway through its production run. 3 vehicles most people would never connect. A discontinued badge farm truck, a blue-collar pickup, and one of the first mainstream compact SUVs, all sharing the same engineering lineage across barely a decade. Drop a comment if your family still has one of these running. We want to hear the mileage. Number 8. Mazda Titan. Here's a truck that didn't even get to keep its own name in every market, or even in every generation of its own run. The story is stranger than a simple badge swap. Mazda engineered the Titan independently from 1971 through its 3rd generation in 1989. Starting with the 4th generation, that changed completely. Mazda stopped engineering its own truck and began selling a rebadged Isuzu Elf instead, the same truck sitting at position 6 on this list. Ford needed a mid-size commercial truck for export markets. It didn't have the platform to build cheaply, so 2nd generation Titans were rebadged and sold as the Ford Trader across Asia and the Pacific. That partnership predates the Isuzu relationship entirely. But the deeper twist, the one most owners never learn, is what happened after. Once the badge sharing with Isuzu began, it never stopped. Every Titan since has been, mechanically, an elf wearing a Mazda grille. That's not a flaw. If anything, it's proof of how good the underlying engineering was. Competing manufacturers deciding the same chassis and drivetrain were worth putting their own name on, rather than engineering something different from scratch. The diesel variants are the ones that built the reputation regardless of badge. Simple mechanical injection, no electronics to fail in humid climates, and a duty cycle that assumed the truck would run 12-hour shifts without complaint. The Isuzu relationship isn't the only cross-manufacturer thread here, either. Mazda's own 2nd generation Titan was also sold in Korea, under the Kia badge for nearly 2 decades, meaning this truck's identity has been split across multiple company logos at different points in its history, depending on which decade and which country you're standing in. Compare that shared platform pragmatism to a modern diesel work truck, bristling with emissions hardware that fails before the engine does. The old badge engineering approach starts to look less like corporate cost-cutting and more like an entire industry agreeing on what actually worked. Nobody remembers the Titan by name because it was never trying to be its own name. It was trying to be reliable enough that other companies wanted their logo on it. This kind of badge engineering was far more common in Japanese commercial trucking than most enthusiasts realize. Competing manufacturers frequently found it cheaper to license a proven design than develop and certify a new one from scratch for a market segment where margins were already thin. The Titan is one of the more thoroughly shared examples still findable on used export listings today, which is exactly why we're able to show it to you. Tell us in the comments if you knew about the Isuzu Elf connection before this video. Most people never do. Number 7. Toyota Dyna / ToyoAce. A cab-over truck puts the driver's knees 6 inches from a steel bumper and a diesel engine directly under the seat. Nobody designs that layout for comfort. Toyota designed it because in mountain villages with roads barely wider than the truck itself, wheelbase is the only thing standing between a delivery and a dead end. The Dyna, badged ToyoAce, in some Japanese trim levels and export markets, became the default truck for small Japanese businesses through the 80s and 90s precisely because of that layout. Short overall length, tight turning radius, and a 4x4 variant that could handle the unpaved forestry roads where the paved network simply stopped. It's the truck behind the truck you'd actually notice, the one that delivered the goods to the store before the store had a delivery van of its own. The Dyna and ToyoAce nameplates have technically run since the late 1970s, and, in various generations, continue in production markets today. Which means this isn't a truck that had its moment and disappeared. It's a truck that's been quietly doing the same job in the same shape for close to 5 decades, updated just enough to keep meeting emissions rules without ever needing to change what actually made it work. Put a Dyna next to a modern box truck attempting the same mountain switchback, and the difference becomes obvious fast. Modern commercial trucks are built for depot-to-depot highway runs, not the last mile up a logging road. The Dyna was built almost exclusively for that last mile, and outside Japan, almost nobody has ever seen one attempt it. It never needed a nickname or a following. It needed to fit down a road built before trucks existed, and decades later it still does, which in a truck category where most rivals get redesigned into irrelevance every 10 years, might be the most overbuilt fact on this entire list. The ToyoAce badge itself carries a story worth knowing. The name was originally chosen in the 1950s to signal Toyota's ambition to lead the small truck category, and Toyota has kept that badge alive on and off for generations since, even as the Dyna name became the more common global export designation. 2 names, 1 enduring mission. Build the truck that fits where nothing else can. In practice, most independent mechanics who service both trucks will tell you the Dyna and the ToyoAce are close enough mechanically that parts frequently interchange between them depending on model year and market, which means a Dyna owner stranded far from a dedicated Toyota commercial parts supplier still has a workable path to keeping the truck running, another small design choice that adds up to decades of uptime. Comment if you've seen one of these still running a delivery route. We're building a list of sightings. Number 6. Isuzu Elf. Buried in a shipping manifest is a fact that undersells itself. The Isuzu Elf's underlying platform has been exported and rebadged under more manufacturer names than almost any other commercial truck on Earth: Chevrolet, GMC, Bedford, and, as we just covered at position 8, Mazda and Nissan too. Outside logistics circles, almost nobody has ever heard the name Elf at all, despite it effectively being one of the most produced work trucks in human history, under one badge or another. The Elf nameplate itself dates back to 1959, making it one of the longest continuously running commercial truck lines Japan has ever built. Its 4x4 variant found its real home in Southeast Asia and parts of Latin America, where unpaved supply routes and monsoon seasons turn ordinary delivery work into off-road driving without anyone calling it that. Isuzu didn't chase comfort or badge prestige. The Elf's whole design brief was uptime, and diesel engines simple enough that a roadside mechanic with basic tools could keep one running indefinitely. Compare that to how quickly a modern light-duty truck sidelines itself the moment its emission sensors throw a fault code, and the Elf's stubborn mechanical simplicity looks less old-fashioned and more like a truck built for a world that still exists outside dealership service centers. This is the halfway point of the list, and it's worth saying plainly. The Elf platform is probably the single most produced truck most Western viewers have never once noticed by its actual name, anywhere, ever. Despite some version of it working on every inhabited continent right now, wearing at least half a dozen different badges depending on which country you're standing in. That's not a coincidence. When one design gets licensed, cloned, and rebadged this many times by this many competing manufacturers, that's the industry itself telling you which truck actually got the engineering right. Even General Motors ran versions of the Elf platform in North America under the Chevrolet, and GMC low-cab forward names for years, sourcing production from Isuzu rather than engineering a competitor from scratch. Which means there's a real chance a work crew in the United States has been driving an Elf descendant for years without anyone on the crew knowing its actual origin. In the UK, it wore Bedford badging. In parts of South Korea, it appeared as a Daewoo. Very few trucks anywhere have worn this many different corporate identities while remaining underneath the sheet metal, essentially the same machine. Comment if you've ever ridden in the back of one of these, under any of its badges. We know a lot of you have, even if you never knew the name. Number 5. UD Nissan Diesel Condor. Job sites don't care about pedigree. The Nissan Diesel Condor, later rebadged UD after Nissan Diesel became its own entity under the UD Trucks name, earned its keep as a flatbed and dump body workhorse on Japanese construction sites, hauling material up half-finished access roads that a paved road truck would refuse outright, all without ever becoming a name anyone outside the trade would recognize. Unlike the badge-shared trucks we just covered, the Condor's lineage runs through Nissan's dedicated commercial diesel division rather than a shared passenger truck platform. Nissan Diesel operated as its own manufacturer for decades before eventually becoming UD Trucks, which means the Condor's engineering priorities were commercial duty from the ground up, not adapted from a lighter-duty design. The transfer case and low-range gearing on the four-wheel drive variants weren't optional extras. On a construction site, low range is the difference between finishing the job and calling for a tow. There's a particular kind of overbuilt that never gets photographed. The truck covered in the same layer of job site dust for a decade, doing the same route between the quarry and the pour site, never once making it into a magazine because nobody thought to point a camera at it. That's the Condor. It did the unglamorous work competently enough that nobody had a reason to write about it. The diesel engines Nissan Diesel built for the Condor line carried a reputation among Japanese fleet operators for running well past the point where a comparable gasoline commercial engine would have needed a rebuild, a durability difference that mattered enormously to companies running these trucks 6 days a week for a decade or more. Reliability that boring doesn't win awards. It just keeps a construction crew on schedule for 30 years, which is a much harder thing to do than win an award. Unlike the last two trucks on this countdown, the Condor never got tangled up in badge-sharing arrangements with other manufacturers. It's one of the few genuinely independent commercial truck lineages on this entire list, engineered, built, and sold under Nissan Diesel's own name from a company that existed for one purpose: heavy-duty trucks, nothing else, for decades. When Nissan Diesel eventually rebranded as UD Trucks, the Condor name carried across that transition largely intact, a rare case of a commercial nameplate outliving the corporate identity that originally launched it. Drop a comment if you've operated one of these on a job site. We want the real work stories, not the spec sheet version. Number 4. Mitsubishi Fuso Canter Guts Trim. Most manufacturers bury toughness in a spec sheet nobody reads. Mitsubishi put it directly on the truck. In 1987, the Canter's off-road trim, previously badged Canter 15, was renamed Guts. Not a subtle trim name, not a marketing focus group's compromise, just a Japanese commercial truck company deciding that subtlety wasn't the point, decades before the word overbuilt became a YouTube keyword. The name wasn't empty branding. Guts trim Canters ran a short wheelbase specifically tuned for logging roads, paired with low-range gearing, aggressive enough to crawl grades that would have a standard commercial cab over spinning its wheels helplessly. Logging companies bought these because forestry roads in Japan's mountain regions are barely maintained switchbacks cut decades ago and never widened since. The kind of terrain that turns a normal delivery truck into a liability within the first mile. The Guts trim has outlasted multiple full-model generations of the standard Canter around it. It survived the 5th generation Canter, carried through the 6th generation redesign in 1993, and kept its name and its mission through the Generation Canter global platform relaunch in 2002. Very few trim names in commercial trucking have that kind of staying power, because very few trim names actually mean something mechanical rather than cosmetic. Set a Guts trim Canter next to a modern logging support truck, and the contrast is almost funny. Modern trucks carry telemetry systems and traction control computers to manage terrain that the Canter simply muscled through with gearing alone. No electronics required, nothing to fail when it mattered most, on roads where a dead sensor could strand a crew for a full working day. It's rising in this list because the stakes are rising with it. This isn't a farm truck or a delivery truck anymore. This is a truck built specifically to survive terrain that ends careers for lesser equipment, on purpose, with its toughness spelled out on the door for 40 years running. Buyers importing these secondhand today specifically search for the Guts badge over a standard Canter, even when the underlying mechanical specs look similar on paper, because the trim name has become a genuine signal of which trucks got the reinforced components and which didn't. That's a rare thing, a marketing name that actually tells you something true about the hardware underneath it, in an industry where trim badges usually mean nothing more than a different sticker and a slightly nicer stereo. Comment Guts below if you think this badge deserved a bigger following than it ever got. Number 3. Hino Ranger. Toyota owns Hino, but almost nobody outside the trucking industry connects the two, which is strange because Hino's Ranger has spent over 4 decades doing the exact kind of overbuilt duty Toyota's own trucks get famous for, just wearing a name most viewers have never bothered to look up. The Ranger nameplate dates all the way back to 1964, launched as the 3.5-ton KM300, making it one of the older, continuously running, medium-duty truck names in Japan. The boxy, aerodynamic for its era look most collectors associate with the Ranger today arrived with the 3rd generation in 1980, marketed at the time as the Wind Ranger, positioned as a step up from lighter cab overs, like the Dyna and Elf we've already covered, genuinely heavier duty hardware, built for cargo and terrain that would overload a smaller truck's frame. Hino has operated as a dedicated commercial vehicle manufacturer since long before Toyota took its controlling stake, which means the Ranger's engineering DNA comes from a company whose entire business was hauling, not adapting a passenger platform for cargo duty. The Ranger chassis has long served as a base platform for Japanese fire and rescue trucks. 4x4 Ranger-based units show up in fire department service across Japan, built to reach terrain a standard road-going fire engine simply can't. Japan has also donated Ranger-based fire trucks to fire departments abroad, which means this truck's reputation for reliability under pressure isn't just a domestic story anymore. Worth a quick disambiguation, Hino's smallest Ranger variant, the FA, was itself a rebadged Toyota Dyna, the truck we covered at position 7, but the 4-wheel drive Ranger featured here is a heavier class entirely, the FT and GT models, genuinely engineered by Hino, one of which even competed in the Dakar Rally. Compare the Ranger's remote utility service record to a modern medium-duty truck, and the gap widens fast. Modern trucks in this class are increasingly built for depot logistics. Optimized routes, paved roads, predictable loads. The Ranger was built for the opposite: unpredictable terrain, unknown load conditions, and jobs that start exactly when everything else has stopped working. This is where the countdown stops being about nostalgia and starts being about consequence. A key truck failing means a farmer walks home. A medium-duty truck failing in a remote utility role means supplies don't arrive on schedule. Overbuilt stops being a nice-to-have here. It becomes the entire reason the truck exists. Comment below if you've seen one of these in utility or emergency service. We're curious how far this truck's reputation actually travels. Number 2. Datsun 720. The badge on this truck barely survived its own production run. The Datsun name was phased out of Nissan's US lineup by 1984, 2 full years before the 720 itself stopped production in 1986. Which means the final Datsun-badged 720S and the first Nissan-badged 720S off the very same line looked identical, built by the same workers, on the same tooling, just wearing a corporate decision that had nothing to do with engineering. Introduced in October 1979 for the 1980 model year, the 720 replaced the 620 with genuinely modern for its era engineering. Before Nissan's global reputation for reliability existed as a marketing line, it existed as an engineering habit. Early trucks ran carbureted engines simple enough for a farmer to service with hand tools. The diesel option, a 2.2-liter unit badged SD22, arrived in 1982 for two-wheel drive US models only, and was later succeeded by a larger 2.5-liter SD25. The four-wheel drive versions kept a solid front axle and a properly divorced transfer case, engineering built with almost defiant mechanical simplicity. The 720 wasn't trying to be sophisticated, it was trying to never strand the person driving it, anywhere, under any conditions. Here's the quiet humiliation buried in a truck this old. Decades later, mechanics still describe pre-electronic Datsun and early Nissan trucks as easier to keep alive long-term than plenty of modern equivalents choked with sensors and control modules. A points and carburetor engine doesn't throw a check engine light and shut down a job site. It just runs, badly if it must, but it runs. The 720 was also the platform that quietly birthed the Nissan Pathfinder. An aftermarket conversion called the Bushmaster appeared as early as 1984, and by mid-1986, Nissan turned that idea into a factory SUV built on the same bones. Most Pathfinder owners today have no idea their SUV's ancestor was a stripped-down farm truck, a nameplate erased by a corporate decision, on a truck that refuses to be erased from actual service. That's the story here, and it's the reason this one earns the spot right before the close. Number 1. Isuzu Forward F-Series. Every truck on this list did its job quietly. This one closes the countdown because it's the one built to do the heaviest job of all of them, and it's still doing it today, over 5 decades after it started. The Isuzu Forward, sold in some export markets as part of Isuzu's F-Series lineup, and worth distinguishing clearly from the lighter Elf/N Series trucks we covered earlier in this list, is a medium to heavy-duty commercial cab-over that has run continuously since 1970, scaling up everything the smaller trucks on this list proved could work. Where the Suzuki Carry survived on being small enough to fit anywhere, the Forward survives on being heavy-duty enough to haul loads that would break lighter trucks entirely, up to 7+ liters of diesel displacement, paired with a low-range transfer case rated for genuine off-highway hauling duty, not just occasional gravel. Isuzu's cab-over engineering history runs deep here. The company built the world's first 2-ton light-duty cab-forward truck back in 1959, and the Forward line that followed in 1970 scaled that same forward control philosophy up into genuine heavy-duty territory. That's over half a century of continuous refinement on a single core idea. Put the driver over the front axle and build everything behind that decision as tough as the job demands. It never became a household name in the West, but it became something more durable than fame. Infrastructure. Isuzu Forwards move cargo on every inhabited continent right now, in mining operations, forestry, remote construction. The kind of duty cycle that would retire a lesser truck within a few years, done for decades without complaint. That's the thread running through every truck on this list, and this one closes it out loudest. None of these trucks were built to be admired. They were built to survive being ignored, to keep running long after anyone stopped expecting them to, in places nobody was watching, for people who never once wrote a review. And unlike several trucks earlier on this countdown, the Forward has never needed another manufacturer's badge to sell itself. No Chevrolet version, no Ford export deal, just 5 decades of a Japanese heavy-duty truck company building the same forward control idea, better, generation after generation, until it simply became one of the standards the rest of the industry gets measured against. Fitting. For the truck closing out a list built entirely on trucks that earned their reputation the slow way. Which of these 10 surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. And if you've operated one yourself, tell us how many years it's been running. 10 trucks, one badge engineering twist nobody saw coming, and a closer that's been in continuous production since 1970. That's the thing about Overbuilt. It's rarely the truck with the loudest reputation. It's the one still parked on a job site 50 years later that nobody thought to ask about. Which one surprised you more, the Datsun with the erased name, or finding out the Titan and the Elf were the same truck wearing 2 different logos? Argue about it in the comments. We'll be reading.